Okay, we're here at the Berlin Wall Memorial, and just a little history before we see what this looks like, this whole thing. So, in 1945, just before the war ended in February, the Allied leaders met at Yalta, and they knew they were going to win, so they were basically breaking up Europe between the Allies but within the Allies, like what Russia was going to get, what the Americans were going to control, what the British were going to control. So they decided that Germany was going to be broken into, as well as Berlin the city. So Berlin the city is actually in the entire eastern part of Germany. So it was kind of like a little bit of an island here. And up until 1961, people living in Berlin were allowed to kind of move freely in between the east side of the city, which was communist, and the west side of the city, which was democratic. So people would have family who would live on either side, and they may live on one side and work in the other, or you know, your mom lives on one side of the city and you live on the other side of the city. And so people move back and forth pretty freely. But as communism began to not be what people thought it was going to be, people from the east began to move to the west. And as a result, the communists began to put up a wall in 1961-ish. Okay, and this is the first wall, or a part of it, and this is what it looks like. All right, and at the memorial here, they do a good job of showing its progression and how it changed between early 1960s and when the wall fell about 30 years later. So here's a little hole, you know, that people would have looked through. We're looking from the west into the east, so that would have been East Germany. Now there's a Volvo there. And so this ran, you know, essentially the length of the city to keep East Germans in, basically. It's kind of like a prison. You can see straight ahead here that this abuts a cemetery. And so the area that I'm currently standing in early 1960 was actually a cemetery, and the East Germans decided that they needed to expand and make the wall a greater protection, because this wasn't really keeping people in. And you know, I'm not a tall guy, but this is pretty tall. It's probably maybe 1.5 of me, so you know, 7 or 8 feet, no, maybe 10 feet tall. And it wasn't doing a very good job. So soon after, they created a secondary fence. So it made this little baby strip here. So here's the wall as it stood, and here is the remnants of a secondary fence. Okay, so if in 1963 you wanted to get into West Germany, you had to scale that wall, which was covered in barbed wire, and then you had to get past this fence, and there's a little strip in between. Turns out that wasn't working very well either. So the East Germans decided that this area that was a cemetery was no longer going to be a cemetery. So they dug up the people that were buried here and moved them someplace, and created this vast strip, which became known as a death strip. And you can see to the far side where those cars are, the final wall. So we're just going to make a quick walk through and see, by 1980, if you wanted to escape East Germany to the west, what you would have to encounter along the way. And just on that note, there's about 140 people who were killed in their attempt to make it to freedom on the other side. So we've got the first wall here, barbed wire, followed by a fence right here. And then if you made it past those two, you'd be walking down here. So you'll notice I'm walking on what is an old road. So like I said, back in the 1945 to 1961-ish, this was a road that would have ran from West Germany, where we're looking, to East Germany. Okay, so there was a fairly free flow of people going back and forth, but when they realized that no one was coming back, he went to work and never came back. They decided they needed to do some other things. So as you can see, coming up here is a huge group of people who speak a different language than I think they're Italian. I tried to hang on to the tour to see if I could learn anything, but alas, not my language. You can see here these huge posts that run parallel to the wall behind us, and by 1980 they had put in an electric fence. So this was a fence that was electrified. So once you got over the first wall and that little baby fence, then you had to get into this fence and get through it. Okay, and so you can see the expanse of the area that you had to cover. Okay, so there's the wall over there, and you had to get through this whole section before you got to the fence that I just showed you. So from first wall to the last wall, it's at least solid 75 yards probably, or 100. So you had this fence you had to get past, and once you got past that, you had to get over this humongous wall down here, which is significantly taller than the one on the eastern side. Okay, so again, this is the death strip here, former cemetery that they dug up and turned into kind of a no man's land in between the walls. And then once you got over to here, they've got these metal posts now that represent where it was, and this is one of the longest sections of the wall that's still remaining. You had watchtowers or guard towers along the way, so here's the remains of a guard tower. So if you got into the death strip, East German soldiers were here with shoot-to-kill orders. And then once you did that, your final hurdle was this humongous wall, and you can see how far it goes. This is the longest section still intact in Berlin, and this ran essentially the length of the border between Eastern and Western Berlin. And this is much taller than the wall on the other side. In addition to that, they put on top, as you can see here, these huge concrete round, semicircle round caps, so that would hinder people from, I mean, if you could get a boost up and grab the top, it's more difficult to do. You can see right there that on the left it's flat, so you can maybe grab that and pull yourself up. On the right, not so much. All right, and so you can now, if we look back through the death strip all the way over to that wall, that's a long way to get for freedom. So it was not easy, and 140 some people were killed, but some people made it, and they obviously never went back.